What would you trade for a soul? 30 coins? Cold? Shining? Heavy with guilt? This is the story of Judas Iscariot, not just the betrayer, but a man torn between loyalty and disappointment, greed and guilt. A man like many of us. Stay with us to uncover the weight behind those 30 silver coins, the choices that sealed a fate, and the mercy that still waited in the shadows. Before we begin, if stories like this move you, subscribe to our channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss any of these powerful, soul-stirring Bible dramatizations. Now, let us begin.
The streets of Jerusalem pulsed with life. Vendors shouted, children played, donkeys trotted down narrow paths. But Judas walked alone. He was one of the 12, handpicked by Jesus of Nazareth, called by name, trusted with purpose. Yet this morning the voices of the crowd felt distant. Their noise could not drown out the storm rising within him. What had gone wrong? He had followed the teacher for years. He had seen the miracles, touched the broken, fed the hungry. But the kingdom he expected was not the one Jesus spoke of. He wanted revolution. Jesus offered redemption. He longed for a throne. Jesus spoke of a cross. And so the whispers began. Maybe he's not the one. Maybe he's just another dreamer. Maybe I chose the wrong Messiah. The seed of betrayal is never planted in a day. It begins as a whisper, and Judas had been listening.
Judas had seen wonders. He had seen the blind open their eyes, the lame rise to their feet, the dead stirred to life at a word from Jesus. He had heard parables that made the heart burn, and watched crowds gather like waves to the shore. Every miracle, every word seemed to point to one thing: the kingdom was near. But as the months passed, Judas waited for something more, something bigger, a sword, a revolt, a throne. The teacher spoke of humility, not rebellion, of turning the other cheek, not driving out the Romans, and that disappointed him. He began to wonder, was Jesus truly the one they had waited for, or was he just another voice, another prophet who would die with his dreams? Judas still followed, but his heart had already begun to walk away.
Among the 12, Judas held a special role. He was the keeper of the money bag. He handled the gifts of supporters, bought food, gave to the poor. He knew what things cost, and more than the others, he understood the power of silver. At first it was duty, then it became opportunity. A coin here, a few denarii there, who would notice? They trusted him, even Jesus. But every time he opened the bag, he heard a whisper. You deserve more. You've earned it. Take just a little. Judas wasn't evil. He was tired. Tired of waiting. Tired of hearing about crosses and suffering. He wanted the reward, not just the road. He thought, if Jesus is who he says he is, he'll reveal himself soon. If not, at least I won't be empty-handed. That's how it begins.
not with betrayal, but with compromise. It was 6 days before the Passover. Jesus was in Bethany, in the house of Simon the leper. They reclined at the table. Martha served. Lazarus, once dead, sat beside Jesus. And then she came, Mary, holding an alabaster jar of pure nard worth a year's wages. Without a word, she broke it and poured it over Jesus' feet. The scent filled the house, rich, thick, unforgettable. Judas sat up. "Why this waste?" he snapped. "This perfume could have been sold, and the money given to the poor." The words sounded noble, righteous, generous, but behind his eyes was resentment. That money could have been in the bag, under his control. And Jesus turned to him. "Leave her alone," he said. "She has done a beautiful thing to me. She has prepared me for burial." Burial. The word hit Judas like a cold wind. He looked at the jar, now empty, the oil, now gone, the moment, forever marked, and something in him cracked.
That night, Judas walked alone. The hills around Bethany were quiet, but inside him, a storm had begun. Words from Jesus echoed in his mind. "She has prepared me for burial." Burial? Was he really planning to die? Was this his end game? The crowds wanted a king, but Jesus was speaking like a lamb led to slaughter. And Judas had followed him for what? For 3 years he had walked dusty roads, slept under the stars, watched miracles unfold like sunrise. But now, with Jerusalem near, the teacher spoke of death, not victory. Something inside Judas broke. He didn't curse him, he didn't hate him, but he disconnected. He started to think, if he won't take his place as king, maybe it's time I take mine. The idea was small at first, a whisper in the shadows, but it grew, and it began to speak a name, the name of men in power, the priests, the Sanhedrin. They had always hated Jesus. What would they pay for a whisper in the dark?
That night, Judas walked alone. The hills around Bethany were quiet, but inside him, a storm had begun. Words from Jesus echoed in his mind. "She has prepared me for burial." Burial? Was he really planning to die? Was this his end game? The crowds wanted a king. It was late. The city slept under the watch of Roman guards. But inside the halls of the high priest, shadows whispered. Judas knocked, and they let him in. He didn't hesitate. His voice didn't shake. He said, "What will you give me if I hand him over to you?" The priests looked at one another, stunned, then smiling. This was the break they'd waited for. No crowds, no riots, just a silent betrayal. They counted out 30 silver coins, the price of a slave, a cheap reward for a costly soul. Judas took the money. His fingers lingered on the silver. Cold, heavy, final. They asked, "When?" He said, "Soon,
when no crowd is near." And with that, he turned and walked into the night. The deal was made, the trap was set, and the light was beginning to fade.
The upper room was ready, the table set, the lamb prepared. It was Passover, a night of remembrance, a night of deliverance, and Jesus knew it would be his last. The 12 came in quietly, one by one, Judas among them, the silver still weighing heavy in his pouch. Jesus took a towel and washed their feet, including his. Judas said nothing. He let the teacher kneel before him, touch the feet that would soon walk toward betrayal. Then came the meal. As they ate, Jesus grew troubled. He looked around the table and said, "One of you will betray me." A chill ran through the room. "Is it I, Lord?" they asked, one by one. Even Judas. Jesus replied, "The one who dips his hand with me in the bowl." And at that moment, Judas dipped. Jesus looked at him and said, "What you are about to do, do quickly." The others didn't understand, but Judas did. He stood, he left, and into the night he disappeared.
Across the Kidron Valley, beneath twisted olive trees, Jesus knelt. It was the Garden of Gethsemane, a place of prayer, a place of crushing. He fell to the ground, face to the earth, and prayed, "Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me." His soul was overwhelmed, grief upon grief. The weight of the world pressed down on him. He sweat like drops of blood. But even still, he said, "Not my will, but yours be done." And while he prayed, Judas moved, leading men armed with swords and clubs, soldiers, temple guards, lanterns in the night. He knew the place. He had walked there before. But tonight, he came not as a friend, but as a betrayer. They reached the grove. The torches flickered. Jesus rose to meet them. Judas stepped forward and kissed him. "Rabbi," he said. And with that, the betrayal was complete.
Jesus didn't resist. He didn't run. He didn't call down angels. He simply surrendered. The soldiers bound his hands like a criminal, dragged him from the garden, and vanished into the night. The other disciples fled in fear. But Judas, he stood behind a tree, watching it all unfold. He thought he would feel justified, respected, rewarded. But instead, his heart pounded. His breath was sharp and short. The silver in his pouch felt heavier than ever. Was this how it was supposed to go? He had imagined a confrontation, that maybe Jesus would resist, prove himself, fight back, reveal his glory. But he didn't. And as the ropes tightened around the hands of the one who healed, Judas's own soul began to unravel. A seed of regret was planted. A whisper of horror took root. He turned and began to walk toward the city, alone, uncertain, and already haunted.
They dragged Jesus to the house of the high priest. The courtyard buzzed with accusation.
The Sanhedrin, Israel's most powerful council, was already assembled. False witnesses were lined up, stories twisted, words bent like iron under pressure. Jesus stood silent, even as they shouted lies. And finally, the high priest tore his robes and cried out, "He has blasphemed! What further need do we have of witnesses?" They all condemned him as deserving death. And with that, the beatings began. Spit struck his face, fists bruised his cheeks. They blindfolded him and mocked, "Prophesy, Messiah, who hit you?" Judas heard the sentence. Perhaps not the words, but the echo. Death. They were going to kill him. He hadn't imagined this. He hadn't wanted this. Not really. His mind raced. His feet stumbled. The silver coins now burned in his pouch. He had sold his master. For what? For 30 pieces of silver and a nightmare he could not wake from.